if you don't understand the context that it's acceleration and there's a lot of functional connection leading to this, you might be like, oh, follows take a large first step. But that's not what's happening. No, Sarah is trying her darndest to take a small first step. And Benji's like, come here. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eye so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 23 years and I have about 25. So tonight we are looking at Sarah, who we're having on in a few weeks. If you weren't aware of that, we're very excited about that. And we're looking at Benji as well. Mostly Sarah. We wanted to focus an episode on her since we're going to have her on shortly. So we're talking tonight basically about, our question is, how do I tell my partner that I want to slow things down? And so with that in mind, I think you'll drop it in the chat. Yes?
Yep. And while tonight's episode, we're predominantly focusing on like how a follow slows things down. We'll try as we can to translate those to how a leader can slow things down as well. And someday in the future, we will try to do a leader-centric episode as well. But yes, link is in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch. And when you're done, we will get to analyzing.
The main thing we're going to be looking at tonight is either Sarah not adding momentum or taking away momentum from the system. And the main way she does that is grounding, but we'll talk about a few more of the intricate details when we are looking through it.
Yeah. And then what I'll be doing mainly is highlighting, we can see where Benji is trying to add momentum and how, so we can then see where Sarah is taking that away. Because being able to identify both things so you can train your eye, you should be able to see those things as they're happening so you can learn as you're watching the pros that you love to watch.
Yep.
To the screen share.
The first thing that I want to talk about is what Sarah does at the very beginning of this dance here. Now, she kind of establishes right away that she's not going to want to make this like a high energy dance. And the way she does that is the way she styles this little body roll, and she kind of hangs out there and does a little finger to accent whatever was in the music there. So you can see that she is doing a little something, but it's in place. She doesn't have feet moving. She is only kind of connected to Benji because the way she pauses here, she's like in his hand, but like she's not pitched back with a lot of weight in his hand because she is standing over her own left foot, and she has weight on that right foot, like the toe area of the right foot as well. So she mostly has her own weight, and so this is just kind of signaling to him how she's gonna want the dance to go initially.
Mm-hmm. Like she's movable, but she's not adding energy to a spring, for example. And that's one of the things that she does a lot. She's like, I'm here, you can lead me, but I'm not adding to the spring to be ricocheted out of things.
Yep.
It's very sneaky.
Yeah. And so this is the taking away momentum. Now, this next part here is a great example of follow taking advantage of what their lead is giving them. So because Benji does a free send out, she can take the opportunity to pause and then come around back to him in her own time. And that is another really great example to be like, hey, I want to keep this chill. And the one right after the other is also really good to signal like, I don't just want this particular piece to be low energy. I want this whole dance to be a little bit slower.
And then just as a side note for a spotlight, it's a lovely detail to accent that facing the audience right here.
Yep. Yeah. Sarah does a fantastic job of bringing the audience in. And she really doesn't give him all of her weight until she knows that it's time to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that, Anchor?
Yeah, I was just going to.
Once again, we read each other's minds.
Yep, exactly. So the way that Sarah is going about this anchor is it's very specific in that she is super grounded. You can see how much she's really bent into that left leg. Like the whole foot is flat on the floor, knees bent down into it. Once she kind of shapes out of this right here. And the way that she goes about this establishes the pitch that she needs to really have that control to hang back and not get thrown forward and accelerated. So if you watch, she places that foot ever so slightly underneath her, but like a little bit forward so that she's creating a pitch back because she's already at full extension where she wants to be. So rather than trying to push back to get that like more extension or more rope in order to settle and change the pitch, what she does instead is just place that foot slightly in front of kind of like the middle of her body. And that allows her to create that angle back with her body once she puts the weight on it. And that's what's super important in order to be able to control the momentum that you are putting into the system. So just because your lead is giving you a lot of energy here, like you can kind of control how much of it you really want to use, depending on how pitched you are, because it gives you more control. If you are straight up over your feet, or if you're even a little pitched forward, you're just going to accelerate and you're not going to have control over that. So really being able to control that momentum comes down to grounding and then pitching so that she is having full control over what she's doing in response to what Benji's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Was that what you wanted me to say?
Oh, I've been prepping what I'm going to say about Benji, so I believe what you said was excellent because I trust you. So one thing that I want to highlight, because this is a really actually amazing thing to see, because one of the things that I feel like doesn't get talked about enough with specificity with Sarah is how her frame tends to be straight out ahead of her. And that's because of her size. She is much shorter than many follows. And that's because the center of most leaders happens to be straight out ahead of her shoulders. So you can see with his hitch knee pop right here, he's sending his center straight back away from her shoulder line. And so it's actually just physically, it works out for her to have her frame directly out in front of her shoulders most of the time with most leaders, because when they move their center back, it's affecting her shoulders directly. I know personally, it's my dream to have a leader tall enough for me to have my arms straight out in front of me. Like that sounds so stinking amazing. I don't know. Would that be cool for you too, Alicia? I don't know. It's not something we've talked about, but I know
be nice.
Personally, I would really enjoy that because I think that would work with my just the way I think about frame a little bit better. I'd really enjoy that. And so anyways, I just want to highlight that first before I go into this next thing. So the way Benji is moving into this hitch, he's very much accelerating himself into this 1 and 2 hitch timing. So the accent is on the 1 and 2. And the way that works is it either is sending the partner away from each other. So you're both hitching for the 1 and then coming towards each other and 2. Or you're actually accelerating your follow towards you for that 1 and 2. And so without being inside the system, it's kind of hard to tell exactly which one Benji is leading. But based on the way Sarah is following, since she is not hitching backwards, it is, in my mind, what I think is happening is Benji is maybe asking for her to accelerate towards him.
Yeah.
And she, as Alicia was describing, is like, I don't want to do that. So she's grounding into it instead and not accelerating forward. So is that how you're reading it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so as a result, because she does not accelerate forward, he compensates by bringing his and two closer to her. So she doesn't have to close that distance all by herself.
Yeah. As he gets further into that hitch, like her eyebrow just raises more and more, like she looks more skeptical of what he's doing.
She's like,
okay. What I wanted to point out here is we see Sarah up on her toes. I almost said Tara. Smash those two words together. Anyways, we see Sarah up on her toes initially. I think partially styling, partially because of how Benji was leading. But she almost immediately, once she kind of gets done with this little styling thing that she does, right? So she's up on the toes and then she kind of relaxes the heels down, but not on the floor. Almost immediately, she goes back to really grounding herself. So you can see that foot goes flat on the floor into a rather bent knee, because she doesn't want to leave herself in that position where he could just like throw her across the room and she would have no say in it. So she immediately grounds herself for the next movement. So she's ready. And I want to point out through this how flat-footed she is. And it's not so much because she's, you know, just like flat-footed. It's because she's wanting to not give him a ton of like easy access to rotating her. And it's easier to rotate somebody if their heels are up off the ground. And so what she's doing is she's putting more weight across the whole foot, and that is allowing her to kind of slow things down a little bit and have more control. So you can see that we have this like frame break here where he moves her arm up over him, whatever he's doing. And her arm is moving. The rest of her is kind of moving, but it's not necessarily moving as a whole. It's moving because she wants to move. And then when we come back to facing each other, she then gets into a rather grounded position. She's back to flat foot and she drops into the knees. And then she kind of gets to this pitch back. So she's expecting him at this point to counter her. And I think that he either moves a little bit further away than she was expecting, or I'm not sure. Something happens because she's placing her feet right under her, and then she's coming out of that pitch back ever so slightly. And she recovers it really fast, but
yeah, so he's twisting the handhold quite a lot.
Yeah.
So the one like huge drawback to having a fully extended arm, regardless of what role you're in, is when rotation of the handhold happens, it affects the shoulder faster in time because the arm is fully extended. If there's more rope in the arm, if the elbow is bent, there is more time before rotation in the hand actually affects the shoulder. So you can see as this twisting happens right here, how quickly it affects Sarah's shoulder, and she's having to compensate for it.
Yep.
And I think that's what's affecting her pitch, because she's having to bring her right shoulder forward a little bit.
Yep.
And she's bringing her left arm back to compensate, to kind of stay back weighted.
Yep.
and she's placing her left foot slightly in front again to still kind of stay as back weighted as possible.
Yeah.
But you could really see through Benji's shaping that he is not only through bent knees, he's going to take a big step, but he's going into such deep plie that he's also going to change the elevation of the hand a little bit. And like we've talked about on this show a gazillion times, a change in elevation also encourages a follow to move forward.
Shortens the rope.
It shortens the rope.
Yeah.
And when you do an actual change in distance, if you bring a follow's hand toward you and change the elevation, that's an actual acceleration. And that's why you see Sarah strike her heel here, but then it skids forward a little bit. It's because it's an acceleration. Yeah,
it's an acceleration. And this is not the one time, but one of the few times that it's totally fine to be really like reaching past your own like normal center and like placement of your body, because she's wanting to hang back as much as she can in order to correct her pitch. So she wants that upper body to fall behind the lower body. And that's why she's reaching so much.
Right. And as an extrapolation, I think this is one of those things that is so important to understand in context, because we see so many of the professional dancers, like all-star champion levels, do movements like this, that if you don't understand the context, that it's acceleration and there's a lot of functional connection leading to this, you might be like, oh, follows take a large first step. But that's not what's happening. No,
which is
Sarah
exactly why I said
is trying her darndest to take a small first step. And Benji's like, come here.
But also because of her changing her pitch, she's able to allow that foot to move as far as it needs to before she places it. If she were pitched up or forward, she wouldn't have that control.
Random tangent, but we should totally ask her when she's on about dancing in OG Westy heels versus today. Like I want to hear her go on a rant about that, because that sounds really fun to talk about.
Very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. Because I think this is one of the few times. Yeah. So this is one of the few times that she does add a little bit of momentum to the system, because she has she's flat foot, she's pretty grounded, and then she does a little skip, and the skip adds momentum. It's adding a little bit of momentum kind of up and down, more so than like front to back, but it's still adding some extra momentum in. But I think it has to do with how far she was traveling from one side to the other a little bit. But either way, it's adding a little bit of momentum to the system. But then she immediately goes back to her like flat foot, stable position, which is what I wanted to show. So as soon as she gets to that point where she can turn around and see what Benji's doing, she softens the knee, goes flat foot. We have all the weight on there. So then she is removing that energy that she had.
And I just want to highlight how conscious Benji is about this free leg and spotting back past his left shoulder for placing that foot, so he doesn't step on her. Very much appreciate that detail. Can't tell you how many flaily legs have tried to murder me in the past. Some have almost succeeded. I once went into my chiropractor and they looked at my pelvis and was like, what happened to you? I'm like, what do you like to know? I would like to forget.
That's funny. So once Sarah's coming around, she's staying in this really grounded position that she settles into. And I think at this point, like, you can see that she's really not wanting to add momentum to the system again, because she is moving around him, yes, but she's not doing it in a manner which affects what he's doing or affects the connection with him so much. She's kind of doing it just like under herself of her own power. Like, there's not really anything that is connected to Benji so much. I mean, like, yeah, he's kind of mirroring her, but in terms of like actual connection, it's not so much that she's like adding a ton of weight or anything like that. She's really doing these movements kind of underneath herself so that she has her own power over herself, and she's not adding extra momentum to the connection.
Yeah, see, this is what I call neutral. The
Mhm.
lines of communication are open.
Mhm.
There is natural connection happening just by body weight. Someone's hand is lower than the other person's hand, therefore
Yeah.
there's some natural tension going on.
Mhm.
There's probably some lateral connection happening as well because Sarah's trying to maintain her frame.
Yeah.
So the lines of communication are open. Neither partner is actively using the connection to counterbalance themselves or each
Yeah.
other. Neither person is using the connection to communicate something to the other person or to inform the other person's movement. It's just like, I'm here.
Yep.
We're both on the phone in case something happens.
Yeah.
Someone needs to know something.
Right.
That's what neutral is. Neutral isn't ghosting.
Yeah.
I've been told there's an excellent Robert Royston Sunday Science on this exact topic, which I look forward to purveying at some juncture in the future. Neutral isn't nothing. Hey,
You.
thanks.
No, it's not.
And then I want to highlight because the way Benji is really lunging into his sidestep right here, his
Mhm.
right foot. So even though he's reeling out, he's doing a resisted release into his right arm, and he's extending his right arm while he's moving away from Sarah. It's creating enough tension as he's driving over that right foot that it's bringing her right foot forward a little bit. She's rotating on her right foot and it's kind of sliding across the ground a little bit.
Mhm.
And so even that, she's really resisting. You can see how she's really trying to sink into her back foot as much as
Yeah.
possible. And like he's the one that is moving that foot forward towards him,
Mhm.
not her.
Yeah.
And I just want to be very clear about that. I love doing that shit as a leader. Like that does not annoy me. Like a follow that is light as a feather is harder to lead than a follow that adds weight to the system.
Mhm. As long as it's being added correctly.
Yes, yes, yes. A follow that does not use the weight to facilitate movement, that's a problem. But like a follow that doesn't add any weight to the system is just as bad as a follow that stands there like a rock.
Mhm. Yeah.
And actually, I would almost prefer the rock because then a rock can still counterbalance me. I
Fair.
could still use a rock to counterbalance me and do some fun footwork, whereas a feather is exhausting.
Yeah.
Then it's all on me.
Yeah.
So there's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So this again, like you were saying, is a good example of Sarah trying to pitch back and really just resist what she's being put into. And also because this is an accelerated movement here that we go through. Like, she's really, you can see as she comes around, the arm releases, she sinks right back down as soon as she can, right? Because this is a little accelerated and she kind of gets tossed a little bit up. But as soon as she gets to that point where she's reconnected where she should be, she sinks right back down, and then she's back right under her own control.
You can really see if you pay attention to like that gray colored column behind her and the door, the exit
Mhm.
door to the right. Like she's on releve here, the top of
Yeah.
her head is here. And then as she really grounds into that foot, like right here, you can see how far she has sunk down.
Mhm.
And for someone as tiny as she is, that's a very large percentage of her height that she ground down. So if you were to extrapolate that to a larger person, that same percentage would be an even larger drop
Yeah.
in inches.
Mhm. Yeah.
I feel like that's another thing that gets lost in translation. It's like you move an inch for a prep for a small person, but that same prep for it to work on a larger person might need to be 3 or 5 inches. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
Which might have something to do with the fact that a lot of the pros are very small people.
I know. I remember
But
the first time I saw Todd in person, I was like, "You are so small."
yeah.
For some reason, Jordan didn't surprise me, and then Kilbasa somehow every time, even though I know logically he's like an inch shorter than me, it's like my brain forgets it. My brain chooses to forget it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like certainly he's at least my height, and then I go to see him. Oh no,
Just kidding.
no, nice.
I actually wanted to talk about that little head release that she does there
Alrighty.
for a hot second. So we have her back under her own control. And you can see as she goes into this, she really kind of sets back into Benji. She really grounds into the floor. She bends the knees. And then even here, like this is something, this head release that really could add some extra momentum to the connection to the system because of how kind of drastic of movement it is. But she does it in a manner that doesn't affect anything else. And it's kind of like rather than letting it drop and come back, she's intentionally placing it back and placing it forward, which is different because it's under control rather than if you're dropping it, that's just kind of dropping and giving that momentum. And then here is a great
so
example.
sneaky. I think I want to talk about Benji first, so
Go ahead.
So you have some context about the amount of energy that's going into this, because it's in part probably really obvious, because there's it's almost like a cartoon quality of like, I'm ready to go. Right here. So he's traveling a lot, but this prep right here, where he's really getting ready to swing his free arm down, up, and around, like that's an acceleration kind of thing, which means he wants to continue the rotation. It's not just going to be one rotation and then we're done. It's going to be, there's more than one rotation coming down the pipeline. Why am I suddenly Boris and Natasha? I don't know. But you know what, it makes sense. The damn moose and squirrel. The outtakes are going to be off the hook this week. I'm excited. Some weeks we're too smart and the outtakes are crap, but this week they're great. Okay, cool. So going into this one right here, and you can really see from his body language, he is following through on that acceleration in his own body, which is something as a leader you should do. If you are wanting to accelerate a follow through a rotation or anything else, you want to make sure your own body language is following through on that acceleration yourself. And so he's doing a great job of wanting to encourage the acceleration. But then Sarah is all like, and this is where Alicia takes over.
Yeah, so Sarah does a really good job of kind of not letting him just like toss her through all of this. And you can see what happens initially. So when he's kind of doing this up and down initially, she's ending up on her toes ever so slightly. And that gives him a ton of control to just use acceleration as he wishes and she just really doesn't have as much control over that. But you can see as soon as she's able to, she places the feet both flat on the ground and she really sinks into the knees a little bit. So now she's back under control of what she's doing. Like, it's not necessarily momentum from what Benji's doing. Like, she's not connecting and allowing him to move her so much. They're connected, but because she kind of sinks in, grounds herself, she's able to have a lot of control over her own body movement, which is why she's able to just stop it on a dime, because she does like nullify a lot of that energy initially because of her grounding it. If she were to just let that energy go, you know, like circular, continue going, she would not have been able to stop in such a controlled manner. But because she breaks that like circular momentum by dropping down, then she has more control to do what she wants to do. And that's why she's able to then kind of take her time to come around and like very intentionally stop for a musical piece. Did that all make sense?
Yes. And this brings up something I think we actually talked about 5 million years ago on an episode analyzing Maxence and Alyssa from, I think, an event in Australia. But the concept of when you're wanting to adjust the momentum, basically you have to change the direction that the momentum is going. So if it's circular, you need to transition it to linear, that kind of thing. If it's moving parallel to the ground, send it into the ground, that kind of thing. So if that is another layer that is helpful for you to think about with adjusting the momentum, that can be cool to think about.
It typically means level changes. Yeah. Generally, the easiest is to go down, so grounding. But every once in a while, depending on what's happening, I personally will also change it upwards. But yeah, grounding is usually easiest. So then I wanted to talk about her coming through.
And we have an entire month dedicated to grounding in the archives of our Patreon.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, I did a thing. I plugged our thing. We never do that, but I did it. Yeah. Hey, yay. Okay.
Yes. So Sarah, she has this like stop moment because, as I was saying, she really grounded herself. And then she does kind of the same thing coming around. Like, she is at her stopping point here. And then she is already really bent into that knee that she's standing on. So rather than like really connecting and allowing this arm connection to move her, she is connecting so that it's somewhat moving her, but it's kind of more moving her upper body. She's kind of disconnecting it a little bit so that it's just the upper body moving. The lower body, she's still really grounded. But then she's able to take this really controlled step forward and have her moment, as she does.
Yep. And she's really like, she's building up that rotational tension in her upper body, like you said, and then really pivoting her lower foot at the last second, like right here.
Yep.
As soon as Benji's left foot gets out of the way.
And that's how you can tell that she isn't allowing him to control her movement, is because generally when that happens, everything moves at once. You don't see one thing moving and then another thing moving.
Right.
And even if you're in a shaped position, like everything still moves at the same rate at the same time. It starts and ends at the same time, even if you're shaped. So just because you're in a shaped position doesn't mean that connecting the whole body, you would start moving in one place and then the other place would start moving, if that makes sense. Everything would still start moving at the same rate at the same time.
Right. We still need to do a whole episode on rides. Maybe we can get around to that next month. but
Mhm.
he is trying to manipulate as few variables as possible to keep Sarah stable. So as he is walking around her, you can see how he's almost like, I'm a real boy. His upper body is pretty much like in one position, and he's just facing her with his upper
Mhm.
body as he's stepping side with his right foot and then crossing in front with his left foot.
Mhm.
Very standard footwork for any kind of ride,
Mhm.
and just trying to keep his chest facing her the whole time. And he's trying to keep her right shoulder on the same kind of radii around her axis the whole
Yeah.
time.
Mhm.
And that's what is allowing her to kind of really gently have that rotation that she needs.
Mhm. Yeah, and I also want to point out Sarah's arm. So they initially have this like wrapped position. Benji has his hand on the back of her shoulder, and she's kind of wrapped up and over his
Mhm,
arm, but she's not gripping onto anything. She just has
mm-mm,
it kind of dangling there.
mhm,
And so when he starts moving around her, he has control over her back, like the shoulder area, because that's connected. But she kind of loosens the arm so
mhm,
that he doesn't have control over that. He's not able to move that. So he just has this one piece of her body to move so that she is able to control that even better.
mhm. To be able to duck under anything, that'd be amazing.
So
I know you're
we
gonna
have that same type of arm situation again. So Sarah is really like using the floor. She's very grounded. So she pretty much has control when he's like grabbing the this is the weirdest
I know.
arm situation. I'm not sure what was trying to happen here. Anyways, so so because she is nice and grounded, stable, she's able to just kind of hang out there while she figures out what he's going for.
Mhm,
Um, because he initially is just kind of like reaching, but it's not like an intentional grab. Like she could obviously feel that his hand was there, but like
it's like a neat negotiation
yeah.
because he's like, okay, because one of the things that Kyle and Sarah teach a lot, particularly for follows, is it's really important as a follow to be constantly presenting your frame to be used by your leader to create new and unique things, which is something that I absolutely love about their dancing and how they teach. And so, but this is a really unique place where like there was no room for Sarah to have frame, and yet Benji
Yeah.
reached for it anyways. And but Sarah's like, okay, I can make it work. And so she like bends her elbow and gets her hand out of the way. And he's like, sweet.
Mhm.
And then he's able to do something with it. And it's just like it was
Mhm.
really quick negotiation of connection
Yeah.
that was a little fumbly, but I think it was really cool.
Yeah, it
Um,
worked out. I'm curious what he was initially going for. Maybe
I
he didn't
think he was
either.
going for with what exactly happened, but he just miscalculated how close
Yeah.
she was.
Yeah.
And she fixed it. She's like, "Oh, you need my arm. Here you go."
Uh,
Which I mean, it's hard to calculate where someone's arm is when they're behind your back.
true.
And it does look like based on his initiation right here, it looks like again he's trying to accelerate this
Mhm.
rotation. But Sarah is once again, like Alicia was talking about earlier, being like flat-footed, taking it slower
Mhm.
than Benji is asking for.
Yeah, she's allowing the upper body to move a little bit more than the lower body, and that's why she gets into that like twisted position at the end because she doesn't want that acceleration,
Hmm.
but she's allowing it to move her upper body. She's allowing her upper body to go with the flow. Um, just not the lower body, which is why she gets that twisted position, because the lower body's fallen behind a little bit. So we have the upper body facing forward before the rest.
Like I was just talking about the presenting your frame. This is a really good example right here. As Sarah is rotating back to her left, she's extending her left arm.
Yeah.
And presenting it out to her side so it's available to him to use if he so chose.
And that's one of the places right there coming around when they're going into that roll forward where she does stay connected to him in this particular situation, leaves herself connected to him. And as a whole, she really hasn't been doing that too terribly much. But it's important in this particular situation that she did allow herself to just kind of follow through naturally so that they could go into those turns. And because it's at an angle, it would have been harder for her to catch the right angle had she not stayed connected.
Yeah. So like when you're a follow and you're thinking of all the ways you can slow things down, there's also things to consider, like, should I slow this down? So this is one of those things where it's better to probably not slow it down because of the pattern choice. And then the next level to consider is if you're in a competition or a spotlight environment, you also have to be thinking of the integrity of the phrasing. If you have been slowing things down pretty consistently, you want to maybe like take the brakes off towards the end to allow the dance as a whole to accelerate a little bit. So you can, what's the word that I always use? It starts with an E. I use it in relationship to storytelling. Escalate. So the whole thing can escalate over time. I got there eventually. But yeah, so like if you're just social dancing, slow things down as much as you want all the time.
Yeah.
But competitively, there are some other levels to consider as well. So this looked like to me he was perchance wanting to do something. I couldn't quite tell. Like, what's your take on particular his left hand right here?
Yeah, it looked like he was going for something. Not sure what.
Yeah, because it looked like to me like maybe he had a thought in his head to maybe take her hand right here for another rotation.
Yeah, or elbow or something.
Yeah. But because she puts her hand on his ribs, that's the no.
Yeah. And he's like, okay. I'll put my arm back where it was.
Yeah.
And I kind of love that he chooses to then let her dictate what happens next as well. Because I think that, in my opinion, that's Sarah clearly giving a signal that, like, no, I want to do things my way. So he's like, okay, I'll let you do things your way. I'll give you like a free movement. You know, I'll lead you forward and then you can do what you want to do.
Yep. And it's interesting because competitively, well, that's a frame to freeze on. Because competitively, like we've all seen those dances where it feels like the two dancers are just fighting with each other the whole time.
Yeah.
And those obviously never work because somebody has to be humble.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's now that would be an interesting topic to bring up with like a panel. Like which role should we always bow to, for example? And from a safety perspective, I feel like the follow is always the one in the more compromised position.
Yeah.
So I feel like the best leaders are the ones who are willing to be like, okay, I'm going to put my ego aside. If this is feeling like a fight,
Yeah.
the like anyone, no matter who you are, I feel like you should learn like, oh, this is a fight. I'm going to let the other person win.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick a role, I'd say it would be leaders that really need to learn how to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is arguments for both, because as a follow, that's, you know, your job is to follow. But I certainly agree with you that follows get into the more compromised positions, and so in those cases, it's much easier for the leads to be the ones to be like, okay, let's just go with what's happening.
Right.
So maybe you could say that, like, in different situations, it's, you know, different. So like, if it's just what's happening in the course of a dance, you feel like you're fighting each other, the follow should maybe then be the one to be like, okay, I'll just let you lead. I'll just go, let's go with the flow. But if it's like in the middle of something happening and you feel like there's fighting, then I think in that situation, the lead should be like, okay, let's just go with the flow.
Right. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Nuanced.
I think that's generally my opinion, like,
yeah,
how I like to do things. So
yeah, I get there. I just when I'm tired, like I am today, after decimating my body dancing, it takes some prodding for me to arrive at nuance.
Yeah. So our question again was, how do I tell my partner what to slow things down? And like the main thing is not adding momentum to the system or taking away momentum from the system by like grounding, changing the levels, that type of thing. We also kind of saw Sarah like selectively connect, and like frequently check in with her partner to see what's going on, and then taking advantage of the opportunities that she was given in order to like do her own thing. And her own thing was very much like, I want this to be chill, slow, like that's what she was visually showing him as well. So those are kind of the overalls. Did you have anything to add to that?
I think the only thing is that neutral isn't nothing.
Yeah.
So even though like Sarah would manipulate what she was giving to the connection, that doesn't mean she was ever disconnected. And that's a really important distinction. She was always following Benji. She was just dynamically adjusting what she was giving to the connection based on what she was or was not willing to do based on his lead. And then I had a random idea because I think it would be really cool to start seeing some nerdy West Coast swing merch out there. And we've had suggestions to have an anchor, like a ship's anchor, floating in space because the anchors are out of this world. So I want to propose a fan art contest, and the winner would get a free private lesson from us. How does that sound? Do you like this?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah, let's run this thing. I don't know, through Christmas. I don't know, because things are slow. So yeah, we just came up with it. You can share your submissions to us somewhere. Probably our Facebook page.
Probably the best. Although there's other ways you can get.
There are other ways. We'll maybe do a crowd vote. Yeah. So anchors out of this world plus whatever other shenanigans. If you're a true fan, there will be other things you'll want to add.
Yeah. Sure, there's plenty.
Cool. Well, next time we're going to be talking about how simple done excellently can be just as phenomenal as shiny things. And then after that, Sarah Van Drake will be with us.
Yep. Very excited to have her on with us. So, other than that, I think we will see you next time.
Yeah. Bye. I have so much more energy than I expected to have tonight, considering I killed myself dancing last night.
Yeah.
Both Rosie and I woke up and are like, "Are you alive? No. Are you? No."
Can you hear the TV?
No. Also,
Okay.
your timing was amazing because my stomach just did a and then you said, "Can you hear?" And I'm like, that was an odd way to phrase that you can suddenly hear my stomach. But yes, I can.
That's funny.
But no, I cannot hear the TV, and apparently you cannot hear my stomach, so we're all good.
No.
And then I just want to say Benji does like absolutely lovely job right here, trying to do something unique with the position that they're in.
What is that?
I have no idea if we have new upstairs neighbors. I just know that there's now a dog.
Oh.
It's very loud.
I can tell.
Anyways, one of the first times a friend of mine who's 6'6", I came out the other end of a pattern and I was like, "Was that a Kyle Red pattern?" He was like, "Yes, it was." I'm like, "Fuck yeah! Never followed one of those before. Everybody's too tiny." It was so great.